Well, happy Sabbath, Latter-day Saint people. Yesterday, the Dodger Game channel hit over 1 million minutes of view time in total for these Mormon Truth videos, and now we're going to tie some things together that we looked at on Temple Square yesterday and at the Masonic Temple 6 blocks away. We're looking on LDS.org. It says temples reflect the Savior's love for us, and there's some wonderful people, family members, happy members of the church heading to the temple. Because families can be together forever through Heavenly Father's plan, through temple ordinances, we're told. And so, let's take a look at how mainstream Mormonism really appears to be versus the occult origins of Mormonism and the occult core with which the church is still governed by these Freemasons at the top, who want so much to obscure any possibility of us realizing their Masonic ties in the present. Okay, and what do we really know of Freemasonry? Is it just a nice gentleman's club, or is it founded in witchcraft? And if it is, why are the most sacred items found in the temple endowment derived from this Luciferian religion? Why does Jesus need us to give him secret handshakes to get into the celestial kingdom? Signs, tokens, and penalties of Freemasonry are found within the LDS temple. And when a prophet can speak directly to God and get revelations on anything from what we should be eating or drinking to where a fellow can go on his mission, why does he need to join a Luciferian religion in order to come up with secret handshakes in the temple? Couldn't an angel just come down? Were all the angels too busy to come down and teach Joseph Smith the secret handshakes he needed in the temple? Well, let's make some sense of it. Let's look back at some more pictures and find out why we have all this occult imagery carved into our temples. We've heard excuse after excuse from LDS apologists, and some of them just don't hold water. The bottom line is, these temples were built by Freemasons, by occultists like Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and others. And trying to cover it up is difficult sometimes, just like covering up the church's history has been difficult, with a lot of slip-ups and a lot of anachronisms and a lot of backdating for which they have been busted. All right, moving right along here. So Joseph Smith was an occultist, and he's had to change his history, and his successors changed the history quite a bit to make it look more palatable and more like mainstream Christianity. We're even shown images of Joseph Smith translating golden plates, looking at them, when actually what was marketed to the saints earlier was the fact that that they were being told he got it out of a hat in a seer stone, with a seer stone, a magic rock. Why was he using a magic rock and not looking at any golden plates ever, according to Emma or David Whitmer, who watched him with Oliver Cowdery? And why weren't we told this? Why were we continuously shown pictures in the ensign that didn't match that, but we were shown pictures that made it appear as though he was looking at golden plates? Now, yesterday, we took a look at this temple, the Salt Lake Temple, and we saw disturbing images. What did we see? Well, we saw pentagrams. So yesterday we were looking at the Salt Lake Temple and noticing inverted pentagrams and other occult symbols. And here we're looking, I believe, at the Nauvoo Temple, and we've got We've got the elongated pentagram there, representing the goat's head and his chin. We've got the inverted pentagram within the star inside the Maltese cross. Do we have a symbol of Baal here with this sun god? We hear excuses made for these things, but all of these things are found within Masonry, high-degree Masonry, and occult religious practices, witchcraft, mystery religion. What are they doing on LDS temples? Excuse after excuse doesn't render anything that makes any real sense. Here we've got the all-seeing eye of Horus. Egyptian things that we see in the Freemasonic temples and see in the Mormon temples. The eye of Horus, the eye of the Illuminati. The things that we see coupled with the New World Order. We see these things in the Vatican and in Washington when we're talking about all-seeing eyes, or obelisks, meaning the shaft of Baal. Sorry for the phallic reference, but that's what it is. Whether it's the Washington Monument, with each side being 666 inches long from side to side, and the top to the bottom, the height being 6,666 inches. Just coincidences, right? Just like the way Washington, D.C. is laid out. By the Freemasons. The Freemasons who run not only Mormonism, but the Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientology, Seventh-day Adventists, and evangelical Christianity. Many of the names I've mentioned at other times, from Billy Graham down to Oral Roberts, Robert Schuller, Joel Osteen, Ken Copeland. Here we go again on the temple. These are known to be involved in satanic rites year after year, long before Anton LaVey was making them more popular with LaVeyan Satanism in California. They're all seeing eye. Is that on a baptismal font, people? Why do we see all these things? Why do we have all these occult symbols? Here we are in Salt Lake again, aren't we? This visitor center. How nice. It looks like the Nauvoo temple there. Picture, Tree of Life, and once again, satanic pentagrams in the LDS temple. It all makes sense when you realize guys like Brigham Young, Orson Pratt, Heber Kimball, Oliver Cowdery. These guys were practicing witchcraft. Cowdery was known, just like Joseph Smith Sr., for using, the rod. But they changed that in the Doctrine and Covenants. Got rid of that, just like they changed things and got rid of the Book of Commandments when they made up the story about getting the priesthood from John the Baptist and then the Melchizedek priesthood from Peter, James, and John, and backdated it to 1829. Okay, but we know that William McClellan is an apostle, and that David Whitmer is one of the three who chose the apostles. We're never told of any priesthood. They chose apostles. The apostles weren't given any priesthood. It's ridiculous. Because it was all made up later and backdated, just like the first vision was made up later and backdated. Being a 14-year-old boy in a grove of trees was never anything Joseph told his family or anyone else. That's why Brigham Young, Orson Pratt, Wilford Woodruff, John Taylor, and Heber C. Kimball all made statements contradicting that, saying things such as Joseph never saw God, or God didn't come to see Joseph, but he did send his angel in 1823 and told him that he had got the plates and that there wasn't any true gospel on the earth. Oliver Cowdery said Joseph Smith was praying to find out in 1823 if a supreme being did exist. William Smith, Joseph's brother, said that Joseph began attending these camp meetings in 1823. The Smith family got involved in religion probably 1824, after Alvin died in November of 1823. The spirit that Joseph Smith had visited with, telling him that he could get the golden plates, required him to bring Alvin the following year, so 1824, but Alvin couldn't be brought. He was dead. He died in November of 1823, and that's when the Smith family tried to get involved with religion. And contrary to what Joseph Smith says in the revised church history, that his church family joined the church before he had this vision, which now claims to be 1820, they did so probably about 1824, after Alvin had died. Joseph Smith's father didn't want to join. He was mad at the Presbyterian preacher because he basically hinted that Alvin had gone to hell since he hadn't joined a Christian religion yet. Okay, so we have a revised history. We have a revised history where Joseph Smith pretended that he wasn't involved in money digging, that he wasn't involved in treasure seeking with his magic stone. In fact, he makes it sound as though he was just digging for Josiah Stoll, when as a matter of fact, Josiah Stoll traveled 150 miles to Palmyra to find Joseph Smith because of the great reputation he had as a seer, as a witch, who led many parties to seek for treasure, and drew the magic circles, and drove in the stakes of witch hazel, and sacrificed animals, black animals, by slitting their throats with a magic knife, the same magic knife they drew the magic circle with, to the demons who were guarding the treasure. But the church doesn't want to tell us about these things, and they did try to avoid talking about the seer stone that was used to basically channel the Book of Mormon, with no plates in the room, according to Emma and William. But now the church admits that that stone was used, the very same stone they say that he did use in what they call folk magic. Call it what you like. He practiced black magic, sacrificing the animals in these folk magic excursions with the seer stone. So what does a seer stone look like? And why do we have these satanic pentagrams and hexagrams and all these emblems of witchcraft and Egyptian mystery religion, some of which we find in Masonic temples? Remember when I read Joseph Smith said he and Brigham went to the dedication of a temple, a Masonic temple. That's where we get that from. Yes, this whole religion was based in the occult, but Joe tried to make it look more like Christianity instead of the occult. And so he left things out and changed things and was very dishonest in his history. But if we review things carefully, we can see where he's done that. And they've continued to be very, very dishonest to this day. They're dishonest in the Gospel Topics essays about so many things, aren't they? Why, they're the symbols we find in our individual garments. We don't get the all-seeing eye of Horus there, but we get the square and the compass. And there we see a little handshake going on, don't we? All gained from Luciferians at the top of Freemasonry. Brigham Young, was he not tutored by Albert Pike, who said that Lucifer was God? Yes. His superior in Freemasonry. Let's peek at another page here. Okay, what images do we have here? Okay, so the seer stone that the Book of Mormon was supposedly channeled from, and that we now find in LDS websites, web pages. But here's what we used to see. We used to see this sort of thing in the ensign. But the church leaders knew that was a lie. They knew Joseph wasn't looking at any golden plates. They didn't want to talk about that seer stone anymore. It just didn't look mainstream enough to be using witchcraft, you know. It is condemned in the Book of Mormon. Here's the magic parchment. You know what it's called? It's called Holiness to the Lord. That's right, the same words you see there on the temple. Hiram was carrying this when he died. When he was shot, he had this on his person. And Joseph Smith, this was used, by the way, for in conjunction with incantations being used at these dig sites in the middle of the night. Yes. Where's the magic knife? Let's see if we can find it. Oh my. Anachronistically, we find the use of the name Urim and Thummim to make it look like a seer stone was something biblical, but the use is anachronistic. Joseph had written that into the Book of Mormon, the magic stones, because he was already a seer, a scryer, a junior magician. Now here we can see the Jupiter talisman that Joseph Smith was carrying on his person when he was shot. Jupiter being Joseph's ruling planet. Yes, he was into astrology. Their entire family had been involved in the magic arts for years, generational witches. His mother and father were involved in soothsaying, practicing magic. Yes, to give him power here, this talisman it was helpful to give him power, gaining power and influence over people, especially with women. And we know that he used that quite a bit when he broke his covenants with Emma. He had promised to be her husband, to be faithful, to cleave unto her and none else, to forsake all other women, but instead, with the power of his talisman helping him, he seduced many, including 16-year-old Fanny Alger in 1833, long before even any priesthood, Aaronic, Melchizedek, patriarchal, or any of them, was given. No business about sealing and Elijah till 1836 or so. Nice seer stone, huh? Yes, do you want one? If you learn the right magic spells, you'll be able to dedicate, consecrate, and set one apart. A little more accurate rendition of how the Book of Mormon came to be. A boy with his face in a hat. Well, the point is that Mormonism has been repackaged to look like mainstream Christianity more and more. But the fact is, it was born in the occult. Joseph Smith was an occultist. Brigham Young was an occultist. Probably is the one behind murdering Joseph, Hiram, and Samuel. A power-hungry mass murderer, head of the Danites when they got to Utah, who had many people murdered, whether it was for them leaving the church or threatening him in any possible way, or just the American Indians he had murdered because they were too much trouble. So just kill them all. Give them flour laced with ground glass, as Brigham bragged about, saying that he could kill a lot more Indians that way than with a keg of powder, gunpowder. A good place to reference that is on a website called Lamanite Truth, done by Sarah Newcomb, who has done a tremendous amount of work to bring this research to us, and it's very worthwhile taking a look at. You see, Brigham Young isn't this wonderful guy that you've been taught. He was a terrible minister of death. He was an occultist and a witch. He carried a bloodstone. Your individual garments function to protect you. He used a bloodstone instead. Similar sort of thing, as you were promised that if you were faithful, your garments would work as a shield and a protection for you, that you might be preserved from the powers of the destroyer until your mission on the earth was complete. Well, that's all witchcraft, people. It's the same sort of thing that Joseph Smith was using with his magic talisman and with the bloodstone talisman, basically, that Brigham Young was using. They were implementing these sorts of things in their lives and in the architecture of the temples. That's why we have these satanic symbols there. And they were known and used and passed down through the centuries, long before they were popularized by Anton LaVey in the Church of Satan. All these images depict what I'm talking about. We've been sold a repackaged Mormonism, trying to look like it's not born in the occult. But when you've got to get your scriptures from a magic rock dedicated through witchcraft, as we see here in this picture with Joseph Smith, that's much different from what you were told in Sunday school, isn't it? Just like the fake reference we got on LDS.org saying William Smith was telling us what a truthful boy Joseph was, and that's why his parents believed he'd had the first vision. If you check the reference, he's talking about an 1823 experience where Joseph Smith says the Spirit came to him when he was trying to repent from satisfying his appetites and temptations. That also was changed radically in its wording to make him sound like just an innocent little angel. Yes, and the angel that was now called Moroni was the Spirit, and he was called Nephi. One thing after another has been changed. The name of the church. Joseph Smith created the Church of Christ. He gained the new business partner of Sidney Rigdon, and they changed it to the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which doesn't work well with what's said in the Book of Mormon, supposedly by the Jesus character, stating, "Howbeit my church, save it be called in my name." So in 1838, they changed it again. So why do we have cover-ups there from Joseph Fielding Smith in Essentials in Church History, where he leaves out those details and makes it look like it was always the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Or why did Gordon B. Hinckley lie in his book called Truth Restored, where he states that the church was originally called the Church of Jesus Christ, and then the words of Latter-day Saints were added by inspiration? The first name, he said, which is a fake name, and it was never named, came by divine edict, says Gordon. Well, so he totally changes things, because it was called the Church of Christ, then the Church of the Latter-day Saints, then the current name. Gordon Hinckley's a liar. Joseph Fielding Smith's a liar. Joseph Smith was a liar. Brigham Young was a liar and a mass murderer. John Taylor was a liar who told the people of Europe, and especially in Britain, that there was no polygamy when he had 12 wives. And he did it in the printed word. This isn't a misquote. He had these things printed up to quell the sharing of that fact that was scaring people away. But they got these poor girls to come and find out that they couldn't support themselves and that they were going to be stuck in a situation where they were subject to these maniacs, these maniacal, evil people like Brigham Young, Jedediah Grant, their filthy friends. Yep, the rod of nature. And who used the rod of nature? Joseph Smith Sr. and Oliver Cowdery. And earlier writings reflected that, but they've changed those. They've filtered everything out to make it look perfectly acceptable for your mainstream Christian eyes. Kinderhook plates. Joseph Smith claimed to have translated these ancient records. Well, the Book of Abraham is a proven fraud, as were the Kinderhook plates. Yeah. A descendant of Ham, from his royal loins. Yeah. All these things have been hidden from you. And you check out real history from the church, and their occult links to the Freemasons running the United States, and the banking and pharmaceutical and media and indoctrination system we call schooling, and the other churches. You'll find the Freemasons in their occult Luciferian religion in all of them. And that's why I make the effort to share this stuff, because these guys are not honest, and they never have been. From the treasure cave stories that we hear from folks like Brigham Young and Oliver Cowdery, the secret cave in Cumorah where there's all this gold and golden plates piled up, these fantastic stories that they don't tell you about in Sunday school these days, to the tutelage of Joseph Smith by his occult mentors like Misters Chase and Lawrence, his treasure-seeking pals. We get these warped stories trying to twist things and make it look like Joseph Smith is serving some sort of an Israelite god from early on, but it's nothing of the sort when you read the original texts, not only from his old buddies in the treasure-seeking business that were hostile to him after he didn't split the loot of the alleged plates of gold, which of course never existed. But, you know, the stories of his own family, his mother, and look at the cover-ups there. A family steeped in witchcraft and ceremonial magic for generations. Now let's ask ourselves, what about those golden plates? We've got the angel, or the spirit Nephi, who later became the angel Moroni, who told Joseph he might be tempted to take the plates for their great value to get rich because they were gold. That would only hold true if they were pure gold, of course, and if they were pure gold, they'd weigh close to 200 pounds, which doesn't go well with the stories of him running with them for 3 miles after he, went there on the equinox, a witch's holiday, with his wife Emma, substituting for Alvin, whom the spirit, demon, shape-shifting toad that hit him upside the head when he put the plates down in earlier renditions of the vision. Yeah, when Emma was a substitute for Alvin, who was dead then, always had to, comply with whatever the demons told him he had to do, just like in the other magic expeditions. And so there they were, dressed in black at the equinox with a black horse and a black carriage, and all that sort of thing. All these magical things that you just don't hear about anymore. And then he has to run and escape and knock out 3 assailants on his way while he's carrying 200-pound gold plates. Yeah. But now they say, oh, it was just a gold alloy. That's why it was light enough that he could carry it. Then if it was an alloy, why was an angel supposedly telling him that he'd be tempted in consequence of his family's indigent circumstances if it was some worthless alloy? Oh, the apologists, they change things over and over just to try to make them fit into Joe's ever-changing narrative, which just doesn't work because it's filled with too many lies. Yeah, it just doesn't work. The occult context of Joseph Smith's 1823 discovery of so-called gold plates. Dan Vogel did a nice job. That's a good video. Joseph Smith's 1826 trial and verdict. Oh, he left that out of his history too, didn't he? Yeah, and the fact that he admitted that he did use a seer stone. And that whole trial there, in 1826 with Josiah Stoll's nephews that filed suit against Joseph Smith and charged him with being a disorderly person. He left that out of his history too, because see, he was the seer, not just some random digger. The guy didn't come 150 miles to get more diggers, He came there to get a seer. Joseph was part of that band. He was the leader, basically, because he was the seer sought by Josiah Stoll. That's why he was boarding at the home of Isaac Hale with his dad. That's how he met Emma and eloped with her when her father wasn't too hot on them getting together, since Joe was, not a hard-working lad like they show in the Mormon films, but a swindler and a con man. And it became obvious that Josiah Stoll was just another gullible victim. Oh, but Joseph told him he'd stop doing all this stuff and that it was phony. But he didn't keep his word any more to Emma's dad than he did to Emma when he said he'd be a loyal husband. Then again, later on we blame that on the God of Israel, telling him to disregard his marriage covenants and marry all these other women, including little girls and other men's wives. Even though there's really nothing justifying that in the that business with the other guy's wives. in section 132. Then again, he lied and said it didn't exist. Said he only had one wife. Now, that was true. He only had one wife, but the other women were all his concubines and partners in adultery. Yeah, Joe was a whore. That's all there is to it. And you've been swindled if you're paying tithing to build these buildings built on the foundations of occultism. And who knows if the temples you attend have got the secret rooms at the bottom with the black altars where people are sacrificed, like so many testify have occurred in the Salt Lake Temple. And so many people have testified of satanic ritual abuse by Mormon leaders. And Bishop Glenn L. Pace of the presiding bishopric wrote the memo on it, which got leaked and probably led to his early demise. But let's just forget all about that and just pretend it's all sunshine and families together forever. Ignore the history. Just read what they put in your manual. And remember, follow the brethren and pray, and obey. This is a fake restoration of the gospel. And this is the truth. Men like Gordon B. Hinckley shaking hands using Masonic handshakes with Dick Cheney. Monson doing it with Bush. Their brethren of the satanic underworld working together to bring about the goals of these filthy Freemasons guiding our society. And they evidence it as they shake hands in the grip of the Master Mason, which you know as something else over the altar in the temple. Your prophet showing you what he's really about. Thomas Monson with George Bush, Gordy with Dick Cheney. These guys are occultist Freemasons, and they always have been. Link it up. Try reading Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview by Michael Quinn. The best professor BYU probably ever had. But he was excommunicated when he told too much truth, like about the seer stone, which they now are forced to show on LDS.org and try to make excuses about as to why they hid it from us for 100 years. Later, Gordy. Later, Joe. Later, Dick.